Giant bicycles. What can I actually say about the biggest manufacturer of bicycles in the world? Most people getting into the sport have no idea that Giant has made bikes for almost everyone at one point in time, starting with Schwinn, moving on to Trek, Specialized, and even the likes of Pinarello and Bianchi. The list of brands that haven't been produced in a Giant facility is actually probably less than the ones that have. So how much do we actually know about this colossus of a manufacturing company? This is a new style of video for me, so if you feel inclined, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification. Come to find out, after talking to some people, I know more than I thought I did about the bike industry, and they keep telling me that I need to do some history style videos because I love bicycles. So besides finding a deal or maybe one company selling a product for $100 less than another, why would you get behind a bike brand? For me, it's really not about the image a brand pushes, but about their actions they have taken since their inception. This has led me to be a huge fan of Giant bicycles and how they treat their dealers here in the US. Although not perfect, they are far and above better than what Trek and Specialized has shown. But with this specific video, we're going to go in what actually caused Giant to be one of the biggest manufacturers in the world. How did they go from this tiny little company that started with $100,000 with like 5 investors, and they have grown into one of the biggest powerhouses in the sport. They call them the Big Three. The Big Three are Giant, Trek, Specialized. Those are the big companies that you have to contend with. All the other ones are considered lower tiers, like tier 1, 2, 3, but those are the 3 giants. The origin of Giant bicycles all started in Taiwan with an eel farmer and a typhoon. Japan educated somebody please correct me because I do not know how to pronounce his name correctly. King Louis? I keep in my head, because I have mild dyslexia, I want to say King Louis, but it's not. I'm going to pronounce his name King Liu? L-I-U. Liu. But King Liu had an entire eel farm that was wiped out by a typhoon in the early 70s, and this left him without a business. Instead of rebuilding, he decided to switch gears, take what money he had left and invest in a bicycle manufacturing company. He found a few fellow investors, and between them, they created a small company named Giant with $100,000 in 1972. The name actually came from a baseball team. In the 70s, baseball was huge in Taiwan, and Taiwan was actually good at it, even beating some American teams. The biggest team at the time, and the most popular in Taiwan, was called the Taiwan Giants. After a few years of being in business, in 1977, Giant had its first big break with a huge order coming in from none other than Schwinn bicycles. Yes, the Schwinn that we all know as being the powerhouse of the early days of the cycling industry. A common misconception with Schwinn is that they went offshores with their production much later than 77, and that's because Giant's quality is second to none. After that first batch of 10 speeds, Giant's future looked to be solidified as a quality bicycle manufacturer. In the 80s, there were barely any actual Giant branded bicycles. These are pretty hard to find, as Giant was simply making bikes for Schwinn and other companies at that point. This was all set to change when a business partner of King Liu named Tony Lowe campaigned for an actual Giant brand in 1986. At this point in time, Giant was producing around 80% of Schwinn's inventory. Both companies pursued a joint venture together, but whatever happened behind closed doors led them to split ways, with Schwinn moving all of its production to cheaper manufacturing plants in China. And I honestly think it had something to do with Giant wanting their own branded bicycles, and that really seemed to put Schwinn's panties in a bunch. This was one of the many steps that led Schwinn to ultimately go bankrupt in the 90s. But I find that part of the story pretty interesting and funny because, you know, growing up, even me in the 90s, you think of these companies as Schwinn good, Giant bad, because Schwinn was the American company that lost all of its business to a powerhouse like Giant. And that's really not the case. That was Schwinn's poor business practices led them to ultimately go bankrupt. It was at this point that Giant was the leading producer of nice bikes in the world, and they started making bikes for everyone, Trek and Specialized included. This is the very reason alone why Giant is such a powerhouse. Most of the bikes at the time were coming out of their factories. So in reality, the Giant brand of bicycles did not have to do well at all. Giant is still making money by producing bicycles for other top brands. But on top of that, Giant started making waves with their own designs. And this is where I think really Giant hit a home run here. They came at the industry from let's be a manufacturer, not a brand first. And then once they kind of had this huge reputation of being the premier manufacturer of bicycles, all of these brands like Trek and Specialized started coming to Giant, getting them to make their bikes. And that's when Giant was like, hey, let's push our own brand. Even if our own brand fails, we're still producing all these bikes for other companies. So to me, it was almost a no-brainer for them to do their own brand. Plus, if you're making bikes for all these big companies, I know you're not allowed to copy their patents, but you have to think Giant saw what worked, what didn't work, what was getting warranted, what was breaking. You have to think that they looked at all of that and said, okay, this is how we're gonna make profitable bicycles. And you can see Giant is definitely more in the manufacturing side of things, not the marketing side of things. I always kind of compare them to Toyota, especially Toyota like back in the 90s. They didn't really make anything with the exception of a couple vehicles. Like they didn't make anything flashy, cool, anything like that, but dang if they weren't a great deal and something that would last forever. Giant's first huge technological innovation was the introduction of the CADX road bicycle. This was the first time a manufacturer had computer-aided design and then mass-produced a carbon fiber road bike. Giant may not have made the first carbon bike, but they were the first to mass-produce them and at a somewhat affordable price. You liken this to Henry Ford and the current state of automobiles. Super interesting side note though, when Giant wanted to get into the US market, they heavily pursued the three biggest stores at the time, Kmart, Walmart, and Sears. These American retailers really wanted to stick with American bicycle companies and thus went with Huffy, Murray, and Roadmaster, which I assume is where the whole reputation of department store bikes being junk stemmed from. Could you imagine if Kmart, Walmart, these brands would have said, sure, Giant, let's take your bike and do away with the Huffy and Murray? What kind of bicycles we would be seeing in stores like that? Would Giant simply just start making cheap, inexpensive bikes? Or would we see, $500 to $1,000 mountain bikes in a Walmart? I'm kind of glad it didn't go that way because I really support the local bike shop, but it's just interesting that the crap bikes of our time, Huffy, Murray, Ozone, all these crummy bikes that are technically put together here in the US stemmed from those companies not wanting to make a deal with Giant. That's pretty cool to me. I like those tidbits. The next piece of innovative design from the growing Giant bicycles was the infamous TCR, which has solidified itself as one of the most influential road bikes of all time. Why, you might ask? Well, it was the first to have a compact frame design. This essentially means that you no longer have a horizontal top tube. It is a sloping top tube, therefore making the frame tighter and more compact. There are numerous benefits of this design, but you can see the influence it has had on the bike industry even today. It basically tightens everything up. You can make a lighter frame, better handling frame, just by doing that simple compact frame design. And Giant was the first to do it, and now almost every company, that is almost the industry standard, is to have a compact frame design. And this is just in the road bike side of things when it comes to Giant's innovations. So what started as an eel farm ended up transforming the bike industry as we know it. I'm definitely a big supporter of Giant US also, simply because of how they treat their dealers over some of their competitors, but that's for an entirely different video. I hope that shed a little bit of light on Giant Bicycles as a company and a brand, where they come from, and maybe a little bit of just the history of current bicycles in general. I wanted this to be kind of a short, quick little video, so if you'd like to see another brand or continue this series, leave a comment below, let me know. I love you all. See you in the next one.